And to feel like March, it's right around the corner. Games are tight. They feel more important. Conference races as close as they've ever been. SEC might be determined by a coin flip come next week. And 2 weeks after I said on the show, we're on a collision course to Tampa for the two-team showdown. Well, we got parity now. Welcome to the latest Gauer Hour. Megan, it's like 14 degrees outside my window right now. That's almost as cold as some of my takes the last few weeks. Who's winning the national title?
I don't know. I think that's very exciting. I think we haven't really had a year like this in a while where I think there's a good 7 teams, I would say, could win a national title.
Yeah, I mean,
at least.
Let's just jump right into the bracket reveal. It was outdated within an hour of it being released, but that's all we have to go on. Backtrack back to 12:40 last Sunday. Any qualms with the top 16 as you saw it then? Obviously, games have happened since.
Not really, honestly. Like a couple things I was slightly surprised by, like Texas being ahead of Notre Dame. I mean, they beat LSU shortly after, so like don't really have any issues with that now. A little surprised by NC State in that last 2 spot, but again, I think justifiable. So I feel like it was pretty much as expected.
Yeah, that's fair. Your 1 seeds, UCLA, South Carolina, Texas, Notre Dame. I don't think anyone would have fought you really on any of those. USC just outside at 5. The 2 seeds, USC, LSU, NC State, UConn. 3 seeds, TCU, UNC, K-State, Duke. And then Kentucky, Ohio State, which I thought was surprising at 14, which probably proven right. Oklahoma 15, Tennessee 16. My biggest qualm with this, even, I understand we're talking 5 days after the fact, but even 90 minutes after this was released, it was outdated. Like, I kind of wish this was a Monday or a Tuesday thing. Like, make it, college football is obviously 1 day a week, but like they make it a thing on Tuesday. So it has some staying power. If they release this on a Monday or a Tuesday of halftime of pick your thing, like it just has more staying power because it's hard for me to sit there and go, well, yeah, South Carolina, they make sense as the number 2 overall seed. And then they lose by 29 at home.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that because it's outdated so quickly, and especially with the slate of games on Sunday and their impact on like the top 2 seed lines. Like you had UConn, South Carolina, and then you had Texas, LSU, and then you had NC State, UNC. Like there was just so many big games on Sunday that just totally disrupted this.
Yes. I thought my only real, not even a qualm, but I thought Kentucky was a little high. Ohio State at 14 surprised me. We're already going to see some shuffling. Yeah. Who is next in line, do you think? Because they don't announce who's teams 17 through 20. Who do you think is next in line right now to possibly steal a top 16 spot?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I haven't redone my bracket for this week, so it would make me.
Like my initial thought was Alabama. They just took a loss to Tennessee, who was the 16 seed, so you can't flop those. Like,
yeah, my other thought was like Michigan State, but like they just had 2 losses with the California road trip, so I don't know.
West Virginia, they have a couple quad one wins.
Yeah, West Virginia had a nice win over Kansas State. I don't know if they're quite there yet, but they're definitely closer now after that win this week. So they're certainly in that conversation. I'd have to look at what Baylor did this week, but Baylor maybe getting close there too.
Spoiler, we're going to talk about all this as we talk about things that are happening. All right, so let's get into the normal stuff. So there is another bracket reveal. It has to be next week, right?
The 27th, I believe. So Thursday. That one will be more relevant when we talk about it, at least.
Yeah, because at that point, there will be basically 2 games left in the regular season for everyone. Predominantly Thursday, Sunday are the big days. So I say 2, some teams will have 1, et cetera, et cetera. But for the most part, Thursday will be our second and final bracket reveal before the big one. Busy night last night. Going into it, I told my wife, because, normally Thursday nights, it's like, all right, got to watch a bunch of games. Like, yeah, this is a more quiet night, I thought, than normal. Turns out that was not the case. Where do you want to start from last night? A couple of interesting results in a couple of different conferences. So we'll go where you want to take it.
Yeah, shall we start with what I thought was the biggest upset, maybe, which was the Indiana. Maybe not the fact that Indiana won it, but the way that they won over Ohio State.
Yes, that was not a 10-point game.
No.
I mean, it's been coming for Ohio State, right?
Yeah.
Like they didn't blow it in the fourth quarter, but like Minnesota made a comeback, forced overtime, Ohio State won. The last 70 seconds of Monday's win over Iowa was a debacle. They were up 10, somehow managed to go to overtime, and then they win. So like they haven't been playing, great basketball for 40 minutes. So the fact that Indiana, one of the best home environments in the country, I'll talk about that in a little while too, because I have complaints about other schools and their attendance, but Indiana, part of that problem. Crowd was into it. Indiana jumped out to a lead, buried them in the third quarter. From the Indiana side, I thought Indiana kind of needed a game like this. They just had an up and down year. It feels like they haven't really built a whole lot of momentum. They've had some close calls. They're not quite like Oklahoma State streaky, but like Iowa, they'll have USC on the ropes. They won't crack 50 against Oregon. They won't crack 50 against Minnesota. This is like a 7 seed, I feel like, where like you maybe take your chances with them, but if they get hot, like that's a 7 seed that's scary.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this is probably a nice one for them in terms of just building some confidence going into March and into the postseason. Top 10 team. I think, I don't know. I haven't even looked at the AP poll, but I'm assuming Ohio State's near the top 10.
Right.
Yeah. So a big win here for Indiana. And I think it's the kind of win you want to get at this time of the year, right? Like you've got a lot of big games coming, but it's kind of nice to get one of these and like see that you can do it before you get into the Big Ten tournament and then the NCAA tournament.
We've talked a lot about like that middle of the pack in the Big Ten, your Iowas, your Illinois, your Oregons, your Nebraskas, your Minnesotas, Michigan. Like Indiana's been there, but we're as guilty as anyone of just kind of ignoring the fact that Indiana's there. Like they had an early season loss to Harvard that doesn't look as bad as it appeared at the time. Bad loss at Butler. But like they started 1-2. They fell out of the top 25. They lost by 30 to North Carolina. And then they didn't play anyone for a while. It's like, all right, like there's not really a need to talk about Indiana basketball that much. But like they're no different than any of these other teams that are safely in the field. Right? Like they're just, flip a coin between them and 7 other teams I just listed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is going to help them with their seed, but yeah, they're safely in the field somewhere between probably that 7 and 10 line that a lot of these Big Ten teams are living in, and they're right there with that group. And I don't know, I feel like the Big Ten tournament is just going to be very interesting. As much as like I expect kind of like probably to come to head with like UCLA and USC, I still think like a lot of these mid-round games are going to be very interesting.
Yeah, for nothing else than just for seeding. The Ohio State side of it. We mentioned it's been coming. I thought, forget the result last night. Again, don't listen to the AP poll. AP is ranked 8th. They were 14th by the committee. I thought that alone for at that point, 21-3 team, 22-3 team. Like I thought that spoke volumes, especially for a team. I know, like at that point, they played the bulk of the Big Ten schedule, and they still didn't really respect them that much.
Yeah, I agree. I was a little surprised at where they fell in the selection thing, and I think it's like you didn't challenge yourself in the non-conference, and like you didn't win any of the major games in the Big Ten, like be it a USC or a UCLA, and I think it's an eye test thing, honestly. Like I think this team has just not looked the part of a top 10 team, and I think we saw that come through in the selection committee there, because like the numbers kind of point to them being a little higher than they were, but I think it's an eye test thing. This team just doesn't look the part.
Yeah, like margin of victory isn't like a technical mathematical thing. I guess it kind of is in the net.
Yeah.
Like they have fine wins. They beat Illinois by 9. They beat Michigan by 7. They beat Oregon by 9. They beat Maryland by 8. They beat Nebraska by 6. Like all these, like take nothing away from these wins. They beat Iowa in overtime. They beat Minnesota in overtime. You also just kind of look at UCLA beats these teams by 20. Right. USC beats most of these teams by 15. And sure, like there are games where they don't. But I guess if you're just looking to pick nits here, like Ohio State doesn't have that, which I guess they're being punished for.
Yeah,
they're proven right.
Yeah, in a way, I feel like it's because those results like indicate that this team is maybe a little closer to that group of teams in the middle of the tier than they are to a UCLA and a USC. Fair.
Yeah, and I will say, we've been hard on Cody McMahon. I think she's been excellent for them. And so is Jelani Cambridge. The problem is,
what are you getting from everyone
largely
else?
it. Yeah, Kennedy Cambridge had a decent game against Iowa on Monday, but like Chance Gray hasn't been good for like a month. Started with an 0 in the win over Maryland. She was 1 of 8 last night. Taylor Theory is like, she's an X factor, and she'll have a 20-point game against Nebraska. Then like she'll go 3 games without hitting double figures. So she averages 10. It's a very streaky 10. It comes in spurts. Right now, they just don't have the depth, which I didn't think would be an issue, but it appears to be, because like McMahon's been really good and Cambridge has been good.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, that's probably good enough until it isn't, apparently.
Yeah.
The other Big Ten game last night was the latest one. It was a 9:30 Eastern start. UCLA beats Illinois. Speaking of the eye test, obviously, Lauren Betts missed the Sunday game against Michigan State. Pull out a win. Tamia Gardner, big 3 late. Up 4 at the end of the third quarter last night, pull away in the fourth. So like a fine win. Good win. Are you still as high on UCLA as you were pre-USC loss? Maybe even like last Friday when we spoke before we saw their next 2 games. Because I feel like they're still probably, if you ask me, the best team in the country.
Yeah.
I had to think about it though. Which last Friday, I probably didn't.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're still the best team in the country, but I don't think this is like a South Carolina in recent memory best team in the country where it's like they're untouchable. I think we've seen the USC game, for example, some weaknesses, but just these last 2 games too, and like obviously not having Lauren Betts was a big thing in that Michigan State game, and they still get the win, and that's a nice win without her. But they just look a little bit more vulnerable. So I'm kind of interested to see how they close out the season here, and then as we get into the Big Ten tournament, like do they turn a corner and start to look kind of more dominant like they did for a stretch kind of leading up to that USC game, or do we still continue to see kind of this version of UCLA? And I think it's hard to tell with this team because like they had that big win at the beginning of the season, and then they just like they didn't play anyone, it felt like, for like the longest time. And then you got into Big Ten play, but like the USC game is really the only big, like, and we just talked about how we felt about Ohio State. So like it's only top tier type opponent, and I feel like you learn the most about these like group of like 7 teams that we say that can win the national championship by when they play each other.
I mean, they just kind of had it in cruise control for really until last week for the most part. And then again, it's a very high bar that we're trying to set for this team here. Loss at USC, where maybe the most rawly talented player in the country put up one of the, 10 best 2-way performances by a guard I've ever seen. Fine. Followed up with, a win over 2 top 25 teams, just maybe not as emphatically as we had just seen for a month and a half, 2 months, really the whole season before last week. So, I'm just curious if this is a little ebb and flow of a season. It's just a bad time to be on the downside of that.
Right. You want to be playing your best basketball right now. So it's not the time that you want to see that, but they still have time to turn it around before it all really matters.
Right. I still think their best is better than everyone else's best.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And Lauren Betts, she missed Sunday, 22, 7 rebounds, 6 blocks, 34 minutes, had Kendall Bostic, and 3 for 11. Apparently she's fine. Speaking of National Player of the Year contenders, Notre Dame, we don't need to talk about Notre Dame beating Maryland, but I feel like we haven't talked about Notre Dame in a while. And it's almost to the point with them, kind of like how we felt about UCLA recently, where are we almost taking for granted that, sure, maybe the ACC isn't as good as the Big Ten or the SEC. They're also passing the eye test.
Yeah.
Like we said, Ohio State's not beating teams great. Great. Notre Dame's just cruising along.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yes, the ACC isn't the SEC or the Big Ten, but there's still a lot of, there was 4 teams in that conference that were in that top 16 reveal. So like there's still a high level of competition in Duke and UNC and NC State. And it seems like it doesn't really matter who Notre Dame plays at this point. It's just like they win by a lot. Like I haven't honestly watched a ton of them because they just win by a lot. It's not the most exciting basketball games. So it does kind of feel like we're taking, we just assume that they're going to be good. They assume they're going to win until they don't, and until we get to March.
So right now, they're probably the best team in the country.
Yeah, right? I think you can make an argument. I think you can make an argument for a handful of teams being the best team in the country. And Notre Dame is certainly one of those.
Big game on Sunday. NC State game day is going to Raleigh. That place is going to be loud. Only holds 5,000. It's a very loud 5,000. And NC State's coming off a nice win over Georgia Tech last night. Pretty much went wire to wire. I know Georgia Tech's a nice story. Probably going to get their most wins since 2012 when they went to the Sweet 16. I'm out on them.
Yeah.
Like they're they're closer to that Florida State, Cal, Stanford tier than they are to the top of the ACC, which is fine. Like that's an excellent year. I just compared to maybe where we thought their ceiling might be a couple months ago, they're just not there, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's what you get from conference play, right? Like when you start playing these teams that are at a higher level with a little bit more regularity and a little more consistency, I think it exposes the teams that are truly at the top versus those that are kind of more in that middle path.
Yeah, Georgia Tech beat North Carolina in December, and then December 21st, they beat Nebraska. Since then, their best win is Clemson or Virginia.
Yeah, not great.
So, yeah. So which is fine. They're going to be a fine NCAA tournament team. Someone outside of the Big Ten needs to be an 8 seed or a 7 seed.
Right. Because especially 8 or 9, right? Because they have to play each other in the first round. Like,
right.
It's a nightmare trying to put that in.
We're just going to have the Big Ten ACC challenge in the 8-9 games, in the 7-10 games, including Louisville. Nice win over Duke. We'll talk about Duke in a second. Louisville's starting to turn the corner. We've said it for a couple of weeks. Now they've come through with a top 15 win on the road, starting to play well at the right time.
Yeah. Never count out a Jeff Walz team. I think I've learned that lesson many of times that somehow it doesn't really matter how they start. That team is always looking much better than it did in November by the time you get to March. And it feels like similar story here. Obviously, this is a huge win for them, right? Like, we've seen them be consistently better over the last handful of weeks, but to get the big win over Duke, I think is a big one here in terms of, I don't know, like probably the best one you can get in the ACC outside of Notre Dame and maybe NC State. I think you could interchange which one of those two is the best one. So
Jada Curry starting to step up. Remember, she led the Pac-12 in scoring a couple years ago at Cal. Senior Jalea Williams has played really well the last few weeks. The freshmen are starting to grow up. Yeah, slow start, but we talked about the bubble being weak, and it still is. I feel like, though, the 7 to 9 seeds, they're about as strong as they've ever been. If I were a 1 or a 2 seed, you should just kind of pencil them into the Sweet 16, and sure, maybe you still do, but it's like these 7, 8, 9 seeds can absolutely, clearly, case in point last night, go to somewhere in the first 2 rounds and beat someone.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're seeing that. I think we're still going to see the first round type blowouts that we typically see against the top teams in the tournament. But I think when we get to these second round games, that there's going to be a lot of close games, and yeah, the other teams are going to have home court advantage. But I do think that we'll see a couple upsets, and I don't think that teams are going to blow by their 7 to 10 seeds.
No,
in
especially
the way that they would have in the women's tournament 5-8 years ago.
Right. Like you might get 1.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you're a team right now saying, oh, we're going to UCLA, they look more gettable than they did. Mm-hmm. South Carolina looks a lot more gettable than it did 2 weeks ago. Go down the list of 1 seeds. Maybe Notre Dame just looks untouchable right now, just given the way they're playing. But, oh, we're going to go to Ohio State. Sure, we can win. Like, yeah, It's more so than I feel like we've talked about in the past. Duke did that last year, went to Ohio State and won, the only real upset of the top 16. Duke's going to host this year, probably, right?
I think they're pretty comfortable.
even after,
I think there's a kind of a cliff, like as we just talked about trying to figure out who the next team up is. There's a bit of a cliff there. I think they're pretty comfortable.
Well, also on a cliff is Duke's offense.
Yeah.
Where it's better than last year. It's streaky, though. Like, they have moments where they look like last year's team. Reagan Richardson finally got back to 10 points. She's been really bad before last night. And, they can't go anywhere if she's not even just, regular bad. 1 of 8 bad all the time. They can't win like that. Ashlyn Jackson hasn't done anything for the last 3 games. Toby Fournier was quiet last night. Bad time to go into an offensive slump.
Yeah. This team's defense is always going to keep them in it, but we're getting to the point of you've got to score, right? You got to be able to get the big buckets, and we're just not seeing that from Duke right now. And we know it's in there. We've seen it at times this season, but I'll probably say this 4 more times today. You want to be playing your best basketball right now, and I don't think we're seeing that from Duke at the moment.
Is the defense going to keep them in it? NC State scored 60 points and a half on them almost 2 weeks ago.
True.
And Notre Dame put up a comfortable, they only scored 64 points and then didn't let Duke crack 50. So like their defense will keep you in games in the first 2 rounds, and then you meet up with someone with an actual offense in the Sweet 16 or the second weekend, and can you score enough? I don't know. Which is frustrating because there were a couple of times this season where we've said, "Oh, they've figured out the offensive part," and
Nope.
they've like 79% figured it out, like a
Yeah.
C plus.
Which is better than like the D that it probably was last year. It's progress. It's just not quite there yet.
Fair. My other complaint, which has nothing to do with Duke as a program, I will call out the fans. There was nobody there last night. And like people have talked about hosting, going back to neutral sites for the first 2 rounds. I was kind of in the favor of let's try it. And then I actually looked at attendance numbers for the country last night. No chance. You're going to
Yeah.
play in front of 3/4 empty arenas. Like for all the growth on TV side, the attendance side is not there. Outside of 6 programs, it's
Yeah.
not there.
Yeah.
Like
I
Duke's a
actually
top.
don't like the hosting setup though. Like I think it rewards teams for what they do in the regular season more. I don't know. Like I don't have a
Sure.
problem with it. And then like you said, you get better crowds. And when the top seeds win, you get better basketball in the second and final weekend.
Right. You just have people wish, oh, I wish it was a neutral site. Like
More upset.
every other sport except for basically men's basketball, their home games.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there are 6 programs that average 10,000 or more a game. Technically 5, but Iowa State's like 9,950. Like I'll round up. South Carolina, Iowa, Indiana, UConn, Tennessee, Iowa State. That's it. There are 39 in the men's side that do that. Only 22 teams even get 5,000 a game. 94 men's programs get that. You know who doesn't get 5,000 a game? Duke. They get half that. West Virginia, Ole Miss, Baylor, Oklahoma, UNC, TCU, Alabama. What are all these fans doing? It's annoying. And this is announced attendance, mind you. So like Duke, I'll pick on them. They say there were 2,400 people. Are there actually 2,400 people?
No. It's
So
like when I noticed it at the women's games at UConn, like it says it's a sellout. It's definitely not a sellout with actual attendance.
Right. So it bugs me, and they don't need to go away for the first 2 weekends of hosting. It gives you a reward. It guarantees butts and seats, which TV, I understand, is God, and the TV numbers are really good. It looks better when there are butts and seats, when they pan around the arena. Anyways, off my soapbox here. That's it for the ACC. SEC last night. Bama, Tennessee. I really want to like Alabama. They're still not quite at that level. Not quite.
Yeah, nice win for Tennessee here. Obviously, a team that was the thing I didn't say about the bracket group. I was a little surprised that they were the last team, just like given the UConn win and the eye test and like how close their losses have been. But a nice win and towards keeping that spot here with the win over Alabama.
Boy, no margin ever feels safe. I was in the third quarter. They were up 14 or 15, and I said, all right, 2 more buckets, and I'm going to turn off the game because it's over. They can be up 14. They can be down 14. It just doesn't matter. Keep the game on. Bam, 3 minutes to go. It's a 4-point game. They ultimately win. They're just really balanced.
Yeah.
Like last night, they didn't have Talasia Cooper didn't take over. Jules Spear didn't take over. They just had 7 players score like 7 to 15 points. That's hard to compete with when Tess Darby comes off the bench and just is randomly red hot from 3. So yeah, they're just, Tennessee. I know they have the losses. They might be like a top 10 team, but they can't be because they have 6 losses.
Right. Yeah.
Alabama.
I would rather see Ohio State as my 4th seed in my region than Tennessee for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Alabama. They're excellent year. They've grown from last year where they pretty much win every game they're supposed to. They just haven't taken that next step where they got blown out at Texas. They hung with South Carolina. They were without their best players. They were Ashley Barker. Final margin ultimately is 18. They lost at Kentucky. They lose at Tennessee. They're just waiting. Like, I feel like once they get that first marquee win, I feel like it's like they're going to see exponential growth. They're just not quite there yet. But they're going to be like a 5 seed that, again, I'm not going to want to see.
Yeah.
Second round.
Yeah, I think this is a team you consistently get really solid nights from Sarah Ashley Barker. They've hung around, like you said, with some good teams. If they're supposed to win, they're gonna win. It's not a challenge I would want to have to face in the NCAA tournament.
No, and I mean they have good post presence in Essence Cody, former 5-star, McDonald's All-American. They're just not big aside from her, so Tennessee just largely abused that last night. So nice win for the Lady Vols. Nice win for Oklahoma. You and I feel similarly about Oklahoma. However, when they don't turn the ball over, they're really freaking good.
Yeah, they could just do that with any consistency.
Which the last 2 games they have, and that's
Yeah.
like that doesn't happen often, 2 back-to-back games. But nice win over Vanderbilt, a comfortable win over Vanderbilt.
Yeah. I think, just like you said, when they don't turn the ball over, you see how good they can be, and this is a great example of that. Like, this is a Vanderbilt team that has been very solid, and they made it look like a fairly easy win. And that's what happens when you don't have to fight through 20 turnovers. But I thought we had I feel like Reagan Beers, obviously is good. Hasn't really been all that talked about this season. Had a great night against Vanderbilt last night, and I think that was nice to see for this Oklahoma team.
Parallels kind of to Kiki Iriafen, who, again, excellent numbers at USC. It's almost like you take it for granted, so you don't talk about it. And then obviously she has Juju, who, will just put up a random 30 and 10 nights, so everyone talks about that, and she has the star power. Yeah, Reagan Beers is the same way, where Oklahoma will score 100 points, and sure, they shoot a lot of threes, and sometimes they make a lot of threes. Then they just got this robot down low who will just give you generally like 13 and 11 on an off night. And then when she explodes, you get 30 points on 11 of 13 shooting and 14 rebounds and even 4 assists. Yeah, like we knew she'd be a game changer in Norman when she plays like that. Yeah, they're not the 16th best team. They're a lot better than that. Yeah. What do you make of Vandy? I feel like they maybe flew a little too close to the sun when they deserved their props a few weeks ago, but I feel like they've come back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is a team that's gonna be really, really, really good next year. But like you said, they flew a little close to the sun, and now are just like they've had some of these tough games, and there's a lot of tough games in the SEC, and I think we're seeing that happen. But I think the future is just so bright for this team. Do you know who the leading scorer in the SEC is right now?
I would assume it's Michaela Blake's because she
You
puts
are.
up 30 for them
Yeah.
every night.
You are correct. I mean, 34 last night. She had another 55-point game.
55 on Sunday against Auburn.
Yeah. She's just been so good, and then Camille Pierre has been so good for them too. Like, those are both players that I think they would expect back next year, and like I think this team's going in the right direction. And obviously, this is a huge step right forward, even though like they're coming down to earth a little bit right now. This is a team that was on the bubble last season. They're comfortably in the field this year. Like, they're just going to keep making steps forward.
Yes, they've lost 4 or 5. None of the 4 were close. The win in that span, overtime against a bad Auburn team. Blake's at 55. She's really good. I'm not trying to downgrade her greatness and be, Mr. Debbie Downer here. They're just not a whole lot of help. Like Camille Pierre last night was 3 of 14. I think like Oklahoma was fine with letting Michaela Blake's drop 34 on them because no one else did basically anything. And it helps when, you can do whatever you want offensively. But I feel like they're maybe a little too reliant where against Auburn, when she says, give me the ball and get the hell out of the way, it can work. Doesn't work against even your Oklahomas who don't have the best defense in the world.
Right. Yeah. That's very fair.
It's not a bad problem to have someone who can just drop 55 as a freshman.
She's only going to get better. That's crazy.
Only other SEC game that had to put on Missouri, Kentucky. I didn't expect that last night.
Yeah. I saw
Shout out to the Tigers.
What's going on here?
Well, I'm going to give the Tigers some credit. Their record is bad. They're not going anywhere. The future doesn't look great. Robin Pinchton's out of contract in a month. They've really fought. They beat Mississippi State at the buzzer. Since then, they hung in there against Texas, single-digit loss. Hung in there against Tennessee, single-digit loss. Hung in there with LSU. Led Oklahoma at halftime. Led Kentucky at halftime. You're expected to win when you play Missouri because their record is 2-11 in the conference. But man, like all respect anyone who has every reason in the world to just be like, yeah, we're playing a top 15 team. Probably going to lose. Like they're hanging in there. Kentucky, they're what, 13th in the reveal?
Yeah. I don't
LSU, Tennessee, South Carolina.
That's the team that when you look at that reveal right now, I don't think is going to be in it when we get to Selection Sunday. Unless obviously they could prove us wrong and win one of those games, and then it's a different conversation. But they've got a tough closeout here, and then an SEC tournament as well to play.
Okay, so let's play worst case scenario. They're 0-3 against LSU, against Tennessee. Both of those are at home, at South Carolina. So that put them at 27 going into Greenville. What's their net right now? Their net is 21, and they have 4 quad 1 wins. And that's worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I think they might be safe.
Yeah.
Are they safe with even 1?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend what they do in the SEC tournament. If you lose those 3, because I do think we see the committee like wins in the conference tournament mean a lot more than regular season wins in terms of seeding. That always happens, and yeah, if you lose those 3, you're not giving yourself a lot of cushion for the SEC tournament.
Gotcha, but if they win 1, that goes a long way.
Yeah, you beat Tennessee. I think we're having a different conversation.
Or LSU, or if you go to Columbia.
I'm picking the most realistic one, yeah.
Other results from the week. Wednesday, USC, Michigan State. We talked a little about Michigan State. 2 perfectly respectable losses. Had UCLA without bets on the ropes. We said last week if the Trojans could avoid the chaos, they'd beat Michigan State comfortably. They didn't really avoid the chaos, so it was close. Didn't help that they shot just 1 of 13 from 3. USC, though, like Juju is finding it. Iriafen finding it. It's always had it. Kennedy Smith, really, really good defender. Their stars are starting to play like stars consistently, which just doesn't bode well for everyone else.
Yeah, I feel like this is a team we said in November after like Notre Dame loss is like they were going to get better because they were young, they had new pieces, like they had stuff to figure out, and I think we're seeing that all come together now. And yeah, like Juju has just been obviously that UCLA game, but in general has just been really, really good over the last few weeks, and Kiki as well. And then you get more and more from those freshmen, and this is a team that looks really good heading into March.
I will say they do have like that Iowa game.
Yeah,
they do have the hangover. Like the hangover at Washington on Sunday was incredibly predictable. Mm-hmm. Fell behind by double digits in the third quarter. Took a timeout. It's like, oh. This is actually a thing. Okay. Got it. Got to play. Good. And then they won, not comfortably, but the last minute wasn't really in doubt. If they can just avoid just those quarters where they can't hit water if they fell out of the boat, they can beat anyone in the country. They just, unlike I think some of these other teams, have that capability just a little more than some others. But they have Juju and Kiki.
Yeah.
Most other teams don't. Entertaining game Wednesday from Oregon and Nebraska. Felt like a March game, 94-90. Huskers win in overtime. Huskers, again, they're firmly in the field. They just keep impressing me. Like every time it seems like they're going to fall off, they come up with a win. No Britt Prince on Wednesday. She injured her ankle. Alexis Markowski's really, really good. They've lost 5 of 8. Copy paste, another 8-9 seed. That's going to be scary.
Yep.
Tuesday, Oklahoma State. Nice win at Utah. I told you. I asked you what's going to happen last week. You said you'll tell me after Tuesday.
They won.
State, a road win in the Big 12 is hard.
Yeah.
What do you make of the Cowgirls now?
The same thing I made of them last week. It's just impossible to tell with them. They, like we've said, they have like this very high ceiling, but also this very low floor, and you never really know where between the two of those it's going to fall. I thought looked like Utah kind of had that game in control. Oklahoma State was hanging around in the fourth quarter, just clamped down 18-8 fourth quarter. It's really hard to win in the Big 12. Of the top 8 teams, 3 of them are unbeaten at home. TCU asterisk. The South Carolina game was quote unquote neutral, even though it was in Fort Worth. K-State, West Virginia. Baylor and Oklahoma State have only lost once at home. Utah, Iowa State, Colorado only lost twice at home. One of those for Colorado was Wednesday against Baylor. They didn't have 4 starters. So it's just going on the road anywhere in the top half of the Big 12 is really, really hard to win. Yeah. So kudos to Oklahoma State. If they lost their next game by like 15 against a random like UCF, I'd believe it.
I believe it. Or if they won, if they won their next 2 games by 30 apiece, I also believe it. Yes. The Big 12 is fascinating. Big game on Monday, which we'll get to in the preview. K-State and Baylor. TCU and Baylor tied for first. K-State's right there. Aoka Lee's coming back Saturday. That's big because K-State starting to show some cracks. Tough game on Monday against West Virginia. I didn't really think about it until Rachel Galligan said it last week. Saturday game, fly to Morgantown Sunday to prep for just a different style of play, and you're playing early Monday. You have like 12 hours of prep against a team that hasn't lost at home this year. So I don't take a whole lot away from K-State's loss to West Virginia. I think West Virginia really, really needed it, though, to boost their resume.
Yeah, I think this one means a lot more for West Virginia than it does for K-State. I feel like K-State, one, it's like hard to take too much away from any of these losses without Ayoka Lee, and then like you said, just tough situation, tough game. But for West Virginia, like they have just been lacking the ability to get one of these big wins. And yeah, you have to take a little bit with a grain of salt because it's Kansas State without Ayoka Lee that you beat, but still a really solid win for them in terms of boosting their resume and getting something in that quad one column.
Yeah. And then the other Big Ten game Wednesday, an oldie but a goodie. Michigan came close, but not quite against a good team. It's fun to say once every couple of weeks because it happens all the time. 2-7 against top 25 teams. They split with Michigan State. They beat Minnesota. Maryland, by the way, played with its food again last night, up 18 at halftime. Had to turn on the fourth quarter against Northwestern. They ultimately win. All right. We've been talking for 36 minutes. We've kind of buried the lead 36 minutes in. How about your alma mater? Can't say. If you'd have told me someone won by 29 in Columbia on Sunday, I'd have said I probably don't believe it, but I could have seen it, just not with the roles flipped.
Yeah. No, honestly, I still am like shocked by this outcome. I was talking on my UConn podcast on Tuesday, and I feel like I was starting to find the words to explain what happened because it's just, I know it was shocking to say the least, right? Like, I thought there was a world where UConn could win this game. I did not think there was a world where UConn could win that game in that fashion. And obviously, huge from a UConn perspective, right? Like we've kind of written them off a little bit after the Tennessee loss. It's just like feels like they haven't been able to get it going in any of these big games where it matters, and like it just hasn't really all come together. Well, it certainly all came together against South Carolina, and I think obviously big for UConn in terms of their confidence, big for where everyone thinks they're at this point, because I think a lot of people had kind of been like, yeah, this team is just not a part of that tier that you think is going to win a national championship right now. And well, I think they're certainly back in that conversation. And then for South Carolina, I think when you combine it with the Texas loss, there's some like similar threads that you can point to that are concerning. Like I think you're seeing the Ashlyn Watkins hole a lot more in those two games in terms of like the just disadvantage that they had on the glass, which is just so not customary for a South Carolina team. But like this guy's not falling either for South Carolina.
I'll get to South Carolina in a second, but UConn. First of all, yeah, if you told me they'd won by 29, I'd have probably laughed in your face.
Yeah.
If you told me they'd finish plus 19 on the boards, I'd have probably laughed harder.
Yeah.
If you'd have told me they won at all when Paige Beckers shoots 3 of 12, I'd have guessed they lost by 29. Yeah. I understand she pulled the strings all game and did everything basically but score, but like they're going to go to South Carolina and she's going to shoot like that and they're going to win.
Yeah.
Like gobsmacked. I've been very hard on Nazy Fudd. She was amazing. And that is like other players played really well. Jenna El Alfie, far and away her best game. How about the moves on Jenna El Alfie?
Yeah.
Ashlyn Shade comes in, makes her first shot. She's just a little Energizer Bunny. KK Arnold, Energizer Bunny off the bench. AZ Fudd is what takes them from pretty good second weekend team to like everyone else in that national championship mix if she plays like that.
Yeah, she was just fantastic. And just so good. And I think we've seen with AZ in the past, like when the first few don't go down, like it just doesn't turn into a great game. And
that's how it started Sunday.
Yeah, but that's how it started Sunday. And even like honestly, her like first half wasn't great, and they were still up. But then, like you're like, okay, South Carolina's probably not going to lose this by 20, right? Like they're going to come out in the third quarter, and then like AZ Fudd happened in the third quarter, and there was no coming back for South Carolina. Just scored 18 points in the third quarter alone. Just incredible performance.
The play in the third, I think Bree Hall went down on the other end, so it was basically a 5-on-4. And Paige and AZ just kind of toyed with Joyce Edwards in the corner, like AZ to Paige, back to AZ, and Edwards just like, I don't know what to do. That moment is what UConn fans had waited for basically 4 years now. 5 years, really, if you include when she committed. an AZ announcer commitment. Like, we haven't seen that like that. We started to see them play together more this year after 17 games the first 3 years.
Yeah.
It feels like it's all coming together at a good time. And even they kind of sleptwalked through a first half against Seton Hall on Wednesday. And then even Gino's ripping into the team.
Yeah. It's like the old days.
It's like the old days for the Huskies. And that's good. So South Carolina. They beat Arkansas last night. Yippee skippy.
Mm-hmm.
They are not intimidating down low. And that's like, this is a conversation we expected to have after Watkins went down with an injury. And then they beat everyone in their path largely comfortably, which includes Texas, LSU, and Tennessee. So we just kind of think, all right, I guess they figured it out. And here we are. And like, they've got issues down low compared to what we're typically accustomed to being South Carolina being. Like, they're not scary down low right now.
Yeah, and I think in the Texas game, I wasn't that concerned about it because Texas is big. Like, they've got an advantage down there that most teams don't have. But this UConn team is not a great rebounding team. That is not something that's been their strength this season. And the way they were able to get the edge on the glass, I thought was quite frankly shocking. And it was like UConn's guards too. It was like KK Arnold surrounded by like 3 South Carolina players somehow coming up in the ball. And she's what, 5'9", maybe? Like,
yeah. Who is South Carolina's best player? Which we've said this for basically since Aaliyah Boston left, and last year didn't matter because they were just so dominant. I think I have my answer, but I'm interested in yours. Who is their best player?
It's a hard question because like they're just so balanced and they don't have like that superstar. Because even last year you had like Camila Cardoso that was just such a like overwhelming presence. I think for me it's Tahina Paopao, and she might not be the most like raw skilled player, but just in terms of her leadership and what they get from her, like I think she's maybe best is the wrong word, but like most important player.
Because I feel like it's full Wiley. She was the only one who really. She had 2 quick fouls in the first quarter. And then when they made their run in the second quarter, it was her. I feel like no one else really played with the sense of urgency, which normally it doesn't much matter because South Carolina as a whole is just so much better than everyone else. But like, we've seen twice now this year, a moment where someone just needs to, whether it's like literally take the ball and score or just wake up the team. Like, we just haven't really seen it. They've been punched in the mouth twice, and they just haven't really gotten back up. I don't know, it's just concerning.
Yeah.
Like, I still think if you told me South Carolina makes the Final Four wins at all, yes, like that is within the realm of possibility here. Just that thing I said 2 weeks ago where we're on a collision course to UCLA, South Carolina in Tampa. I can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
By the way, do you know the last time UConn lost by 20? Period. Not 29, just 20.
Is it even in my lifetime?
Yes, the 2007 Elite Eight. They lost to LSU by 23. Do you know the last time they lost by 25?
No, clearly I don't even know.
What year were you born?
94.
Oh, well then, yes, you were not born you weren't around for the 1992 round of 32 against Vanderbilt when they lost by 28. Do you know their worst home loss ever under Gino, at least at Gamble? I imagine it's XL too.
Probably way back. Probably like in Gino's like first season or something.
No, that'd be the 18-point loss to Oregon right before the pandemic.
Well, that also tracks.
Like,
I should have remembered that because I'm sure that was the big storyline coming out of that game.
there are so many just stupid UConn numbers that you can go to over the course of 40 years. This era of South Carolina lost by 29 at home, and UConn under Gino has literally never done that, which is just why. I'm not trying to downplay South Carolina. This is just a stupid wild. UConn fact. Yeah. Other game from Sunday we can quickly go over. I think it's scary that Madison Booker can shoot 7 of 22 against South Carolina and they can win, and she can shoot 3 of 17 against LSU and they can win.
Yeah,
both are at home, but like they keep having all these issues that we bring up every week. And they just keep winning.
Yeah. Yeah, this Texas team, as much as I was down on them after that South Carolina first game against South Carolina without the threes, like, is very much proving me wrong in terms of like you just beat South Carolina, you just beat an LSU team that I consider, despite the fact that they haven't picked up one of these big ones, a part of that kind of group of 7 teams I think could win a national title, and like you're doing it without the threes, so why not? So yeah, I just continue to be impressed with what Texas is able to do. And like they were down in this one. I thought at the first half it kind of looked like it was going to be LSU's game, and then nope,
They
Texas
shot
found a way back.
19% in a half, and they won.
Yeah.
Now, I want to see. Well, I don't enjoy seeing teams shoot 19% and a half. It's not aesthetically pleasing. I'm interested if it happens not at home, because we saw what happened when it happened in Columbia, where they just shot terribly, didn't really compete to win. Didn't shoot great against South Carolina at home. They're at home, they won the game. Didn't shoot great against LSU at home, they won the game. If it happens in Greenville, it happens in the NCAA tournament in the second weekend, in Spokane, Birmingham, wherever they are. I'm interested what it's like when they're not at home.
Yeah.
I think that's the only question I have left, because I'm done questioning Texas. That's all they do is win. The impactful game from Sunday that no one watched except for maybe Megan. Harvard, a not fun to watch 60-54 win over Columbia. It was 19-16 at halftime. Saw similar Richmond St. Joe's vibes. Like, I wonder if the gravity of the situation is just leading to nerves where these two teams both know, like, oh, we need to win the game.
Yeah.
What does it do for Harvard? What does it do for Columbia?
These teams' resumes are like splitting hairs at this point. I think the best case for everyone is like these teams face off in like the Ivy League tournament final, and then one of them gets the auto bid and the other one's going to be an at-large. I think these teams both have resumes that are at-large caliber resumes and like deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. Like it's just to try to say which one would go if it's only one of them. It's just so splitting hairs right now, and it's probably going to just be like who goes farther in the Ivy League tournament.
Fair enough. Harvard won. I think that game was at Columbia, and Columbia won at Harvard, so the road teams win.
Yeah, right. I hope that one of the two of them face off in that, or just one of them wins the Ivy Madness, because I think if Princeton wins it, like it's going to cost one of those two their spot.
Yes, I agree. All right, preview Saturday, tomorrow, Baylor, Iowa State. How close is Baylor to hosting? 23-5. Net is 18. They now have a couple of quad one wins.
They're close. They're close. I think they're definitely in the conversation. And again, like it's a little early to tell for sure, but like win this Iowa State game, and then you've got K-State coming. So I think that's the big one. But win the Iowa State game and you're putting yourself in a good position, I think, to stay in that conversation.
Iowa State, another Q1 opportunity. They are 0-8 in such opportunities this year. I think they're in. They've played better of late. They just, at some point, if I'm going to pick them to win a game of the tournament, prove it, right?
Yeah.
But they're safely in, barring some sort of, like, if they go winless the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think so. We've talked about the weakness of the bubble, so I think they're probably pretty safe. They're probably like hovering in that like last four buys range though, so a little vulnerable if you start getting a couple bid stealers. But I just don't think there's that many mid-major leagues that like are creating a bid stealer situation.
Right, and there's no teams on the outside looking in that are just like banging down the door to get on the field. Sunday, game days in Raleigh for NC State, Notre Dame. Wolfpack have come back down to earth a little bit. Nice win over Georgia Tech last night, but the close call to Miami. They lost Sunday to North Carolina. That was a really good game. I feel like they need to play perfect to beat Notre Dame. Like if they have last night's offense where James and Brooks and Rivers all played well, and Rivers probably guards Hidalgo? Miles? Maybe? One of them?
Yeah, one of them. I don't know which.
Like she's
maybe
really
Miles is just like the size there. I think it's a little bit better matchup. But yeah, I think I'd go Miles.
I just want to see Notre Dame get tested. You mentioned they haven't really an ACC play. They struggled a little bit when Hidalgo was out against Clemson and Georgia Tech. But like they've just been hammering teams. They haven't allowed more than 57 in a couple of weeks. I just want to see what happens if it's a tight game in the fourth quarter on the road at NC State. What happens? I'm not sure it will. I'd like to see it. TCU, West Virginia. TCU Just kind of chilling. They're hosting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is maybe the most evenly matched game of the weekend. Her hoop stats, teams 11th versus 12th in the composite rankings. TCU's top 10 nationally turnover rate. West Virginia loves to force turnovers. Really hard to beat at home is TCU. They haven't lost there this year. How close is West? What would a win for West Virginia do to put
I
them in
think
line?
a win for West Virginia gets them really in that hosting conversation and starts, I think, threatening to get them a spot in there. I don't know that the Kansas State win alone is going to be enough. I think if you win this one too, then you're certainly like fighting or vying for a spot in that top 16.
Realistically speaking, there's 1-2 seed available at this point. USC is closer to a 1 than they are a 3, obviously. They might slide in. If you reseeded it right now, USC might be a 1 seed. LSU isn't going to drop to a 3. UConn has, there were questions if UConn would have lost to South Carolina, UConn's going to be a 2 seed.
Mm-hmm.
That leaves, 1 spot? NC State's chilling there at 8, and then you have probably TCU, K-State, in North Carolina are the real threats. Like, does it matter?
I don't know that it really matters. Like, is there that much of a difference between being a 2 and 3? I don't know. I don't really think so, to be honest.
Fair enough. Just a big difference between being a 4 and a 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Iowa, UCLA. Now that we know Lauren Betts is back, I feel less good about this game. I also didn't feel great about Iowa, USC. And see how that turned out. I will say, since saying Lucy Olson was really, really bad before that USC game, she's been playing really, really good. Obviously, she's the key to Iowa having a shot. She needs to show out.
Yeah, agreed. I think that is always going to be the path for this Iowa team. With Betts, I just don't think Iowa has anything to compete with her inside. But I would have said the same thing about Kiki in the USC game. So you never know. But I still think UCLA probably wins this comfortably.
I just don't see how, unless Stolke. I don't know. Stolke has surprised me before.
Yeah.
I just think there's too much bets for Iowa to handle. Yeah. Kentucky LSU is labeled as a top 15 showdown. It's in Lexington. I just think LSU is better.
Yeah.
Like, Kentucky's 31st in defensive ratings. Can they get enough stops? How is this different from the Texas game? Obviously, LSU's not quite as physical, but they're not so far off of Texas, especially Morrow herself. I just don't see how Kentucky hangs.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the first of the 3 really tough games we've talked about for Kentucky, and I just think that there's a lot of situations with Georgia Amore is enough, and this is just not going to be one of them.
And she's been not great the last couple of games. 15 against Ole Miss. She had 14 against Texas. She did have 43 before that against Oklahoma, but she's just 1 of 8 from 3 across those 2 games, both losses. She was better against Georgia, but no offense, it's Georgia. She was, what'd she do last night? 5 of 14 last night against Missouri. She just has to be 43-point Georgia Amore, I think, for them to have a chance.
Right.
Quick hits for Sunday, Nebraska, Washington. Washington has Nebraska and Minnesota. I keep hearing that they're on the bubble for some reason. If they lose one, they're done. USC, Illinois, interesting game. Virginia Tech, Stanford. Hokies host the Bay Area schools. They're 16-9. They are more bubbly than most.
Yeah.
If they sweep, I feel like they're in.
Yeah, I think if they sweep, they're just fine. They'll be in. I feel like they're just in, this is where it comes to. It's like someone's going to have to make a case to replace them still, and that's where we're really struggling here. There's just no one that I'm that's really knocking down that door to come in. Okay. Unless you're gonna have a 3-bid A10 and just the committee, and that's not gonna happen. But those are the types of teams that are just out.
Glad you mentioned A10. St. Joe's Mason Sunday. St. Joe's followed up a Richmond loss with a loss to Rhode Island. That's it, right? They're toast. Sort of getting the AQ.
Yeah, I think so.
That's 4 losses in the last 2 quadrants.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
So now this has to be a must-win for George Mason, who has yet to beat a quad. It won't be a quad 1 game, but how many quad 2 wins do they have? Scrolling. They don't have any quad 1 or quad 2 wins. So a must win.
Yeah, I think for Mason, this is a really good opportunity now because if you beat St. Joe's, I think that will be a quad 2 win if I'm doing the
Yes.
numbers right in my head. And I think that's what's holding Mason back right now is like there's just no wins in those first two columns, but they don't have any of the bad losses that a St. Joe's or even like a Richmond that I think is a at-large team, but they have bad losses, and Mason doesn't have that, but they don't have the wins to go with it. And I think a big win here goes a long way for Mason.
So if St. Joe's wins, are our dreams dead? If Richmond gets the auto qualifier?
I think so, unfortunately.
So
I
we're
don't want to
talking.
say dinner because I'm still like someone's got to go in, and I don't know who it is, but just knowing the committee, I feel like they put like a Washington in over like a Mason with no
Yeah,
quota
we're
mark.
talking 3-bid A10 all year, and if it's 1-bid, that'd be
That would be
disappointing.
really disappointing.
Monday, K-State Baylor, first place, kind of on the line. TCU was there too. I like the Bears. Aoka Lee's back. Supposedly supposed to be back tomorrow for K-State Kansas. Aaronette Vonleh has been a nice addition for Baylor. Big games against good bigs, she has struggled. Oregon, 5 points against Philly Che. Oklahoma State, 5 points. 2 points against UCLA and Lauren Betts. 9 points against Sedona Prince and TCU. I cherry-picked some of her worst games, and she had a good one against West Virginia. She had 21. None of her other best games came against this caliber of competition. And with Aoka Lee back, I can't see Baylor doing quite enough unless they just explode from 3 or something to beat K-State with Aoka Lee down low.
Yeah, I think this is a case where Vonleh needs to be really good for them, and it's a good chance to see if that can happen. I think that's the biggest like holdback for the Bears right now is like, can they get that in a quality game? Because the rest of the pieces have come together really nicely, but you need that inside presence, and they're going to need it against Aoka Lee, obviously.
Big Ten takes over Wednesday. Ohio State, Michigan State. Is this suddenly a must-win for Ohio State for their hosting chances?
It very well might be considering where they were in the field, and now you lost the Indiana game. I think if you drop Michigan State here too, you're in dangerous territory.
Michigan State, they probably can't host.
I think that this weekend knocked them out, unfortunately.
7 losses already.
Yeah.
6 quad 1 losses and a quad 2 loss. So they're not bad losses, but they're piling up. And when you compare that even to like a Tennessee who has more quad 1 wins, more quad 2 wins.
Right.
That's why Tennessee gets the benefit of the doubt and Michigan State doesn't. Minnesota, Washington again. Washington, if they don't go 2-0, I pray to God, I hope I stop seeing them in projections because they would have now 13 losses or 12 losses. Michigan, Iowa should be fun on Wednesday. Thursday, can't be worse than round 1. Duke, UNC. Hope someone cracks 15 regulation. Kentucky, Tennessee. I like Kentucky against Tennessee more than I do against LSU, but I also am curious. Kentucky plays basically 6 people. Tennessee plays 6,000 people. Can the Wildcats hang for 40 minutes against fresher legs? Maybe.
I think you're going to run into the size thing again here, too, though. Like, Tennessee might not be as big as Texas, but they're certainly got a lot of size. And then, like you said, 6 people versus a lineup that comes in and out every few minutes is a tough battle.
And then Alabama, LSU. I don't feel as good about that being a game.
Yeah.
Because Alabama's just, again, they're close. They're just not quite there.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see them win. Like, this would be a program changing type win given just it's LSU, the name brand. That more so than like the talent on the floor is, I think, what Alabama's missing than anything else. And then Thursday, can Creighton hang with UConn? History for the past however many years since they rejoined the Big East to show no, but Creighton is ranked.
Yeah. No, I think this is the most exciting Big East game that UConn will have, other than the one where they were at Creighton. So I am interested to see what it looks like for UConn. I think a lot of coming off that game win from South Carolina. It's like, okay, they could do it in one game. Can they do it consistently? And I think we didn't see it against Seton Hall in the first half, but this Creighton game is a good chance to see like what UConn comes out like.
My goal, given the amount of basketball that we have to watch between now and the next month, my goal is to watch UConn basketball. Maybe next Thursday against Creighton. Maybe in the Big East Championship game. Hopefully not until the second round.
Yeah.
If I turn it on before then, something has gone wrong. somewhere along the way.
Fair,
That's my
fair.
goal, is to watch as little UConn as possible, because I'm assuming they're taking care of business.
Yes.
Megan, oh, well, UConn's on the road this week, so you're not going to watch them. What you got going the weekend? We don't have that many weekends left before you're just glued to a television.
I know. Oh, I am actually going to stores right after this, but for the day job, not for basketball. Of course, I couldn't have a trip that would allow for me to only make one trip there. But anyway, but otherwise, laying low, updating the bracket.
Yeah, when's that coming?
Hopefully sometime today. It might be tomorrow morning. We'll see.
All right, check out herhoopstats.com. Subscribe. Follow Megan on Twitter @Megan Gauer for all your latest bracketology that time of year, folks. We'll talk to you next week.